The world waits for a miracle. The heart longs for a little bit of hope. Oh come, Emmanuel. A child prays for peace on earth, and she's calling out from a sea of hurt. Oh come, Emmanuel. And can you hear the angels singing glory to the light of the world?
Welcome to What's Left, a weekly political discussion challenging the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Barca, all the way from Mexico City, with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson from Oakland, California. We're online at whatsapppodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as @Don Eduardo Barca. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode wherever you found this episode. We have merch as well. If you fancy a shirt, contact us through our site at whatsleftpodcast.com. All right, thank you. Jay and JD are back, founders of ATA, Appalachian Academy for Therapeutic Arts, and the Rising Sovereign Podcast, a podcast for the spiritually grounded and sovereign-minded, discussions on ancestral nutrition, reshaping education, radical parenting, navigating health, circadian rhythms, and quantum biology. Welcome back, both of you. Thank you so much for being back with us. And folks can check out our episode we did with Jay and JD some episodes back, as well as our recent episode that we did with Jay. Thank you for having been with us, Jay. And now JD's back with us. So Andy, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, well, first again, Jay and JD, welcome back for this. Well, JD, welcome back. Jay, welcome back. And JD, good to have you here as well.
Thank you.
So last week, I feel like I want to start again with, we met you all a year and a half ago when I found out from John Kleisick, Jake, from the show and things like that, that you all were doing, you can call it a freedom school, a home school, an outdoor school, a school that was not about masks and shots, and was not also just about being inside of a room, but was about your relationship to nature and yourself. And that's the Appalachian Academy for Therapeutic Arts. But also we found, so that was very interesting to us because I'm an educator, Eduardo's an educator. And so we're like, oh my gosh, this is the kind of thing we would want to be part of. We would want to learn about that. But we found out then that JD was also knew about this thing. What I never heard about was free births. I knew about midwifery and I was having growing questions about the medical system, the Western medical system, but free birth or primal birth, as we titled that episode, and really learned that there was even new frontiers to learn about ways things that are very natural could be done and how we've kind of made them natural things unnatural. And so that was just a great experience to learn about that and meet you both. And then, of course, Hurricane Helene hit, and I was worried. I remember reaching out just to find out, are you guys okay? But you guys had no electricity, so you weren't going to be able to respond to that. And later we found you did survive, which I didn't know, and now last week was Jay coming and talking about what has happened to your lives since, what happened for you all in Hurricane Helene and how you and your community responded to that. But it was really important to now have this episode with you here, JD, as well, to talk about the journey you have taken from, just your journey together and individually that you've taken since Hurricane Helene and things that have happened for you. And I just want to make this statement because What's Left deals with a lot of things that are way out there, like not way out there in terms of crazy, but farther away from us seemingly. The war in Ukraine, World War III, the war on Palestine or Iran or AI and deportations. But I was telling Jay that last week's episode reminded me very much that it's very, I feel like these kind of episodes are more important for me, not just on a personal level as I get to know both of you, but politically, because they remind me that those things are happening in the world. Some of them are true, some of them there's falsehoods about them as well. But what's real is me and the people that I can touch around me. And you remind me that the way that I'm going to be able to affect the world is is going to be in relationship to better understanding of myself and a better understanding of people directly in physical contact with me, and to understand the scale of what we're dealing with, and that the scale is global in one ways, but it is locally where we can affect it. So I really appreciate being able to talk with you both, because I always feel like you both are grounded in that, and you remind me that. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. Yeah.
So why don't we let you all start with where you want to go from? We last heard about, Hurricane Helene and the fact that you were shutting down your school and you were starting a Rise and Sovereign podcast. And then also, JD, I think was mentioned that you had some physical things you were dealing with as well. So why don't you start anywhere you want to kind of carry on the story from there? And knowing that I do want to really talk about this journey you're taking on with this new podcast and what you're doing there.
Great. Thank you. I'm really touched by what you just shared, Andy, and this process that I find our lives to be in so palpably so often is like this space between, like we're holding the paradoxical aspects of life tangibly, like, which is, I feel like you just described there. Like you are offering podcasts on content that is so incredibly important at like this far reaching state of our lives and humanity, and then the closeness. And that's like this paradox that if we try too hard to be in one or the other, somehow we can't really find our way right now. But what the world is showing us is that we have to figure out how to hold these two things and meet like somewhere like in the middle at the same time. And throughout the last 9 months, I feel like our lives have just been taking us there again and again and again. And it can really not, wear you down, knock you down. But then in that you find your strength. And these like age old parables, right? But it's like we're in it again so significantly. And I mean, the hurricane took our electricity, took our communication because we don't have cell service here, and allowed us to live for almost
Close to a
month with no electricity, no real way to interact with people other than, we had to go on like a walk and then like a 4-wheeler ride. It took 45 minutes or an hour to get 5 miles down the road. And it was crazy challenging. It was beautiful. I found myself washing laundry every 3 days in a big old trash can full of creek water, cooking on a propane stove in our kitchen. So from that place, though, is where you start to really ask these questions and try and figure out, like, what is my life for and what do I really care about? And how do I then find ways to transpose that to help others? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that as you're speaking, it makes me think of this kind of recalibration process that happened. I mean, there was, with everything that comes along with running a school and all of the things that we're thinking about interfacing with all of these different logistical things, there was a huge reset that happened where we were forced to focus on what we were going to be drinking for water and what we were going to be eating. And so it really, in a way, kind of primed us to then take this next step. And it really, it was a strong influence in in what allowed us to just ask some of these more fundamental questions. And yeah, so that would be my feedback on that.
And then maybe the question I have is, how in doing one thing that you believe so firmly in, but its time has passed, how did you make the decision to know how did you come to the decision of what was next from that? Because that's not easy to do. So I wonder, maybe walk me through that thinking or living process that had you go from ADA to Rising Sovereign podcast and say, we think this is the next way to go.
Yeah. Well, as ADA began last year before the hurricane, we already felt something. Like, we had questions around, is this really the best means for us to be sharing what we see is important in the world? And could we be affecting more change if how we were like handling or maneuvering our daily actions? And so there was a part of the hurricane and then my simultaneous like health diagnosis that felt like we just got like just stop. And when those things happen, which I know everyone can resonate with, you kind of go back to square one and you start utilizing all the tools that you have to sort through those mysterious aspects of life: prayer, talking to people, sitting outside, talking, like spending time with people that you love and you care about. And for me, it was very existential. Like we were here for 6 weeks or 2 months after the hurricane, and then we decided to travel, mostly driven by supporting my health. And we found ourselves in Arizona, then we found ourselves in California, then I was in Tijuana. And every step of that process wasn't premeditated or predetermined. It was like I would go to a visit, I would meet someone, they would suggest something, and then we would do the next thing. And through that, I came into more awareness around like the new coined term quantum biology, which is very much like rooted in circadian rhythms and understanding the most simple aspects of our modern lives that we all know we need to be in the sun, or we really knew because we opened a nature school, right? But I still didn't quite know. Like, I still didn't quite integrate where I am now, like how important it is to just see the sunrise every morning, like to really see the sunrise every morning, and to do some more simple practices like that to bring my body in another layer of balance with the natural world. And you could say God. So it was through that then I just continued to really dive into quantum biology. I found the school that I did then a program through, the Applied Quantum Biology Institute. And from that, the woman who ran it was starting a business program. And I'm like, well, maybe we should get some business coaching. And her learning her story, she's like, you guys need to start a podcast. And it's something that especially Jay has always played around with, this idea of being able to talk and share with people. And we weren't really sure at first. We're like, oh, I don't know, like, should we do a podcast? So how are we going to even sort through this idea in the midst of all of what felt like overwhelming chaos? But it was like another day and another day of like, okay, like, let's get into this. Let's talk, let's see. And remembering even where our relationship began, which was through conversation, through really deep time spent mostly in nature, and then coming back and sharing the reflections and the connections that we saw. And so, yeah, it was a few weeks of playing around with the idea of what a podcast could look like. And through encouragement then of people that we began to really trust their feedback and saying, people need to hear you. And even the woman that is like the coach in this process, she's like, I don't tell everybody to start a podcast. But she's like, I'm telling you to do it, because people will want to hear what you've been through and hear your experiences. And from that, they will find empowerment and learning and transformation. And it's interesting because the aspect of what a podcast does is brings us a sense of community in this virtual world that we're finding, our reality to be inherently and inextricably like inseparable from.
Well, I would say that, through the time since we began ADA, there was always a piece that really inspired me and lit me up, and it had to do with sharing these philosophies and concepts behind the vision, why we were doing ADA, and why it is important for each of us to really push to, connect with like our own inner guidance and do what really feels in integrity for us. And so there was a large part of that where I found myself coming back to again and again, whether we were doing appearances at different conferences or just having sort of like a state of the union amongst the parent body, where I would be, either out in the woods and jump up on the nearest tall object and kind of give this inspirational talk of why we're doing this and why this is significant and what the fundamental principles are and how they are reflected in each and every one of us and our connections with each other. And so to find a way to have that be part of my purpose and have it be able to reach a larger audience than the parent body, the student body, and the local community. And and I think one other thing is when we were in California, I went and was interviewed on a friend's podcast, and he was asking me a lot about the hurricane and about ADA. And as I began to share, it was sort of, I hadn't really revisited anything related to ADA because we were just we'd been through the hurricane. We left town finally once things were stabilized here. So as I began to recount and share some of the reasoning behind ADA, it really struck me that all of that is still applicable to our lives now. It's something that I can use as a lot of those guiding principles I can apply to my daily life and how to proceed in a way that's going to support wellness and goodness in, life. So this is another way to continue to promote that and share that and explore that and refine all of that and reach more people, make more connections.
So you meant the two things I heard you say, and I'm a little biased when I hear those things because I listened to the first 3 episodes of your Quantum Sovereign. So I heard some of those journey things that you mentioned, and the interesting thing you brought up, JD, was you mentioned quantum biology and spirituality. And quantum biology is like two very science words. And spirituality, people don't associate with a science thing. And you started off with saying, how do you take two seemingly divergent words and bring them to worlds and bring them together? Because one of the journeys that really struck me was the stuff that came up around baptism. And I imagine when I first met you, you were a spiritual person, but it seems like something has changed for both of you. Like something has definitely accelerated. And to be honest, I've seen that around in my life. My brother went from being an atheist to like heavy duty, like Christianity, Jesus, Bible readings. Same with my mom. And I'm just feeling more and more of that be around me. I still describe myself as an atheist, but immersed in a growing world of like the kinds of things that it sounds like journey you guys went on in terms of a compelling drive towards a spirit world, but also then you mentioned quantum biology. So I wonder if you can speak to the differences or just anything you want to say about the question I'm asking, like how do you see those things as kind of connected? And if you want to say more about quantum biology, you can as well.
I mean, it's a really big question for sure. And it starts to bring tears to my eyes, and I don't have a clear answer. Yeah. I'm happy to share this and to hear you ask me, and to hear what's going on in your world, because I have come into this realm of Christianity, but I never would have identified myself as a Christian in my entire life. I wasn't raised that wasn't how I moved through my adulthood. That's not how I, brought up my children. And somehow through my health journey, this is where I've ended up. And again, I didn't expect it. I wasn't seeking it. I wasn't trying to find it. It was like it found me. And I had an experience where I feel like I was connected with Jesus. And before that, I couldn't even hardly say that word. It was hard to even say the word Jesus in the context of the last 20 years of my life. And it still feels a little strange, to be completely honest with you, but it's something that touched my heart, that I can't make go away, even if I wanted to. And it's definitely been, one of the biggest places we have come into as a couple and trying to understand and explore, because like Jay hasn't had the same health journey, and then this like visceral experience of what I could say is Jesus or something that I've never felt before that I'm trying to make sense of. And so then I'm trying to explain it to him, and he's kind of like, what? So it's been a very unexpected aspect to this entire thing that in some ways I feel more settled and more at home than I ever have. And with the quantum biology piece, I don't know, it's interesting because it feels like it just comes in with moments of like a revelation, and it doesn't really have a lot of explanation or context. But at one point I was sitting, in the sun in the early morning, and I was like, well, the sun, like the sun is everything. The sun is our source of life for every single living thing on the planet. And through that, I am gaining life, and I am gaining life on a spiritual plane and also on a physical plane. And I could just feel that. And it started to make sense. And I had, throughout the journey that I mentioned a minute ago, where we went from Arizona to California to Tijuana and then back to Asheville, I just continued to have more and more people who would just come up to me and start praying. And I would just be like, what? And then I would have moments of like just coming to tears, and then feeling like something in me was shifting and waking up. And there are so many pieces to it that I still don't really understand. Like, we have been to however many, 15 churches in Asheville in the last 9 months. Add another 10 or 15 if you count the ones we went to in Arizona and Nevada and California along the way, and Arkansas, where all the other states you went to, I'm taking you to churches. But just trying to understand what it means, because it's this logical way of how I've lived my life. Christianity meant racism. It meant, being a bigot. Even it meant judgment. It meant like, I'm telling you I'm better than you, which, from the place of like a feminist midwife, I was fighting against that. Right. And so it's very strange. Again, it's like another level of like, God is wiping our slate clean. Now what are you going to do? And I don't know. Does that answer? It doesn't answer anything. It kind of answers something, but
I can only say that those are similar to the things that I hear from my brother and my mom, who are both like totally new to this. Although I think my brother has just settled into it even more and just said, accept it. What are you going to say? It's Jesus. It's that. It's those things. That was not part of any discussion we had 3 years ago or 2 years ago, but they are now part of our life. But I will also say it's made us closer, and it's made us more able to communicate about everything, even if that's not a source, like even if that's not my relation. But there's a truth that he's talking about. I don't know. I can't explain either, but I will just tell you it has brought us closer, not farther apart.
Yeah. And I can say that, for example, like with my older teenage sons, this is a really big deal. Like, I felt like I couldn't even share it with them for months because of how angry they would be, how confused, because I raised them in a very different way. And all of the reasons that, I also thought Christianity was a really awful thing. And when I shared it with them, there was like an openness, and it wasn't like an openness like they were ready to like, become Christian, but an openness on a sense of like their heart. And I don't understand. I don't understand it. I don't understand how that created an openness on their heart, but it did. And even with like our youngest son, who now has been on this journey with us, right? Like, he went through the baptism with us that we did, and he's gone to church with us, whereas the other children haven't. Like, he describes something like this within himself, and it's not something that like, we're not forcing him. Sometimes he doesn't want to go. We don't go to church every Sunday, like but we're trying to find a sense of like rhythm and community to connect and grow what this feels like. And I don't even know if a church is the answer, but it's something that we're trying to like unravel. And he'll come home and he's just like, I felt this love on my heart. I'm like, a 7-year-old's coming to me and just pausing and going like, I felt this love on my heart, Mom. It was really warm. And I felt it after I talked to this person. I'm just like, wow, like there's a sense of like beauty and peace that I also don't feel like I had before. Or if, for example, raising our other children, like it was very much, even though like I thought I was doing something from a sense of love, I see how much it created like anger and fight in them.
Mm-hmm.
And we've always like, you know, like from any of the conversations you've had with us, it's like we're trying to understand how we go beyond these reactionary ways that humans exist, where the very like obvious pattern of the oppressed become the oppressor, and it just continues to like do this over and over and over. And you know, I see that through aiming the first like 20 years of my adult life and raising my kids during those 2 decades and trying to show them love and truth, they became really angry, you know, and really, really violent towards something that like I'm like, oh no, that's not exactly it. But I can see that I was in it too. And yeah, I'm probably going to ramble through this, so you can stop me anytime. But
that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Eduardo, can I share one story? Me and JD are dominating right now, but can I just share this story? Because I think you might relate to this. So it wasn't just my brother, but my mom has gone on this journey of really finding God, talking about Jesus, being a Christian, going to church, taking me to church when I visit her. I went to her study group. Was so proud of her, how she engaged the words, but not from a pat way. She was trying to really answer questions for herself in the study group. And that's what I'm trying to do in my socialism. When I read Marx, it's like, don't take answers, like bring up your questions. And I told her how proud I was to see that she's taking the very same approach to her Christianity and her spiritual journey. But she's, as I told you both, I visit her every year, and I visit her in Missouri in the summer. And I'm concerned this might be the last year, you know, that leaving her this last time might be the last time I see her when she's here. And so I made sure before I left and when I was talking to her to say everything I needed to say to my mother about how I felt, you know. And she, since finding Christ, she is a better mom. I mean, she says it, I know it, like she's a better mom to me at 80 than she was when she was 50 or 40. Um, and so I said everything I needed to say. And then she paused and she wasn't sure what to say. And she grabbed both my hands and started praying, which is never anything that's happened, right? Like that's not anything that's happened. And yet I felt not like, oh, what's going on? But like, it felt so natural and felt so sincere and felt so like this is truly my mom expressing herself to me, like how she feels. And she just kind of just did it spontaneously. Like, I think normally she might say, she might apologize, but I have to pray right now. She didn't do it. She just she launched into it. And it's a very special moment for us, for me now, even though that's only happened one time in my life. And so that's why that whole baptism part of your thing was a big part of me hearing what you guys went on. Maybe I can't say that is my journey or isn't my journey, but it's happening around me. And so that was one big part of what I heard you talking about in your podcast. And I just want to share that story as a mother, and as a son who was raised in some ways the same way, to be very like an atheist missionary running around trying to tell people you shouldn't be Christian. And
but from the goodness of your heart, right? You know, like
I think so, but
I know, but it's very
there's ego in it as well and things like that. But now that ego feels deflated, like it feels like it's not in operation now. Like there was something else going on as well. So I just want to share that story with you.
But
thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing that. It's these stories that happen, and again, it's like you weren't expecting that, I wouldn't think, and that happens, and then there's an opening of your heart, and somehow that's happening on the planet. First, or not somehow, it's happening on the planet. I'm seeing it all over.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's important to be paying attention to. I don't necessarily like think anybody should do something that they don't feel called to do. That's not the point. But if you're wanting to, be an in tune human and an aware human and somebody who is attentive to the goodness of others, just pay attention and see what happens and be curious.
Eduardo, do you want to?
I have lots of questions, of course. As Jay has seen in the last episode, I stay quiet until sometime. So I didn't know you were going to jump right into this and already. Let's see. I'm looking at your Substack, and there's so many areas that I had questions around, and I think I found the one that I found most interesting with this conversation, because there is this area that I think, if I'm not mistaken, JD, you're the one writing from here. You're saying that some friends, if I can just quote, we also dove into a pretty layered discussion. This is after the baptism. We also dove into a pretty layered discussion about quantum versus circadian biology. A friend of ours who follows Christ had some hesitation around the language quantum. It led to an exploration how these terms resonate differently depending on one's background. For him, circadian felt anchored to God's design in nature, the rising sun, the rhythms of the day. Quantum, on the other hand, felt mysterious and maybe even off-putting, given its associations. So I'm seeing, I guess, this conflict of what you mentioned, your background as a feminist, as someone who, in the world of giving life and birth and all that's related to, maybe some would say more associated to New Agey or a different form of path that I think the more traditional conservative Christian path would be different from your former path. Or how would you then find the crossroads to that? Or how is it encountering people that are maybe, as you found, and even in that conflict, it's like, oh, I don't know about the word quantum. It sounds different. It's not in the realm of the Bible Belt. Maybe.
I think for me, it goes back to an element of, I guess what I was just saying is like this curiosity and the mystery, like quantum physics and the scientists, which I am not, who have continued to go into that field. It's like they're driven by the mystery. That's what's taking them to go deeper and deeper and smaller, and through that find these expansive qualities that span like all of reality. And I can understand that, the associations that we have made over the last, since like the 50s, right? Since the Industrial Revolution, around like what is God and what isn't God, and needing to create these big separations from church and state, that it really can become like a heated space for people to know if they're in the right side or the wrong side. And if they choose like one or the other, it's going to mean something about their lives, either on like this plane within the context of other humans or on a spiritual plane with God. And I mean, you actually were part of that specific conversation that I was writing about in relation to the quantum word and the circadian word. Do you have something that you want to expand upon with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you were definitely picking up on something where, within a lot of the church and religious contexts that we have found ourselves in, there does seem to be somewhat of a, very narrow acceptance of certain concepts and terms. Like anything that seems like it's outside of this realm is going to be discarded as, almost like non-beneficial or evil, these types of things.
When you say that, are you meaning like quantum is like an evil word?
I would say quantum quantum could fall into that category. Starting to talk about things that are new age or spiritual, but not rooted in a biblical context. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that really the curiosity is the thing, because for me, it's like I don't have a strong need to be associated with one set of dialectic or jargon versus another. To me, it's an avenue to explore and be curious, and I see all of these things as being either interconnected or potential like bridges to then furthering our exploration or understanding of one another. And so it's like it does get tricky though, because like from certain perspectives it can be threatening or scary to bring in some of these concepts. Like you were sharing the hesitation and the fear to share this with the kids. And I think that part of that is like you came from a place of vulnerability and in authenticity and meeting them with like an open heart yourself. And that's so easy to be missed. Being in a place of having an open heart and being authentic. I mean, it's like the message that resonates with me is that like we are asked to love one another as we would ourselves. And like that concept is like, it seems like we're really struggling with that as the human race. It seems like that's pretty much a hard pill for most of humanity to swallow, myself included. It's not, I'm not putting myself outside of that, but it seems like that's where things do get a little dicey. The fear, and then the what to include in what's okay and what to exclude in what's okay, and it begins to create this tension of this like separation. And it's so easy to get swept up with the hysteria and the frenzy of all of that. Yeah, so I don't know, that's
You might.
that's me riffing right now.
My background, I was raised a Christian for 18 years, and I've read the Bible 3 times completely. Of course, I didn't think I understood it all throughout those 18 years completely, because the Bible is very difficult. But it's one of the. I'm an atheist, and I try to incorporate the way that I see spirituality is through the rhythms of life, and I follow an ecological calendar. I forget the name of the person that did this calendar. That's not follows it in more through seasons and through migrations of birds and harvesting times and solstice. And so that's what I incorporate in my yoga classes. But Andy and I had a conversation some time ago, and he said to me, so actually you asked me through virtually, what are your top 10 favorite books? And number 1 book still continues to be number 1, the Bible. I still love the Bible. So much poetry and so many things I continue reading, and I have it on, I bring it with me everywhere. Even though people think I continue from my background having an appreciation for the Bible. However, I find it fascinating when someone else comes to church, or someone else comes, because I was raised and brought up with it. It's different when you're raised with it. It's different when your mother, your father teaches you. My mother taught it to me. And then someone else converts or changes or gets baptized. I got baptized at age 12. It was my choice, and I had this connection towards my spiritual path. And I just, again, I'd like to inquire more, if it's all right. How did you come to it, or did you make a conscious decision, or how is it because of the region that you're in, or is it because someone talked to you, someone moved you, I'm curious from that part.
Well,
And be as open as you wish.
Yeah, I mean, like initially it was about 3 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago. It doesn't really matter. About that time that I started, it was around Christmas, and I started to listen to Christian Christmas music. And I just didn't stop. And it made me really happy. And that's, I mean, it was weird. I was like, and it was like a secret, and it was like a couple ladies. Nobody knew. He didn't. I don't know if he really knew. Like, I just started, and I kept listening to it, and it was like past Christmas time. It was like February, and I was still listening to it. And then I realized, like, this one artist wasn't just singing, like, she was like Christian Christmas, but then she had like all these other albums, right? Which I didn't even think, it wasn't even something that I wasn't trying to find it. It wasn't like, oh, what other albums does this person even have? It was more like, oh, well, I really like this, and it's February, and I'm still listening to Christmas music. What else? Maybe they have something else. I'm like, oh, well, she has all these like actual Christian albums, and this is even a thing, which I didn't really know. I'd never listened to Christian radio before. Like, it was like, I didn't even, some sense, like I had some sense that there was probably Christian radio stations, because there are every radio station, but like I didn't know. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, there's like this whole genre of Christian music, which, I mean, I'm not, I just continued to like unfold into this musical journey that made me feel really good. And it brought something to my life and my days that I didn't have without it. And from there, it just grew. I can't even really describe what happened next. Like, at what point then the next Christmas rolled around, and I was playing it out loud and everybody was listening. And then, it'd be like, I also now in retrospect feel like I've seen like this element of Jesus or God, or however I'm making sense of this, following me since I was little. Like, and that started to come in. I do, like, that was the next thing I feel that really I started to like pay attention to, was like, for when I was very little, my mom collected angels for me. And I started to remember, I was like, oh my gosh, like I had all these angels, and where did that come from? And I asked my mom, and she's like, I don't really know, it's just what I did. So then I remembered like my experiences with angels as a young child. And then I had like another memory of something that happened when I was a teenager, where I was in the field and I was like looking at the clouds. I was like, that's God. And it was like these pieces came together, but they pointed in a different direction. Like, I had been spiritual. I would say that I was a very spiritual midwife, and I would pray and have these things, but it was in a new age context where it's like, I may have been praying to certain deities in some, in the Eastern tradition, or I may have been meditating from this like place of connecting to like a universal spirit, or something that was more like aligned with my soul, like trying to connect to my higher self, like those types of things. And somehow it was like there was a new thread that had been there all along, but that I hadn't realized, that had to do with Jesus and this other way of looking at God through the lens of what you would describe as Christianity. And then it became more of a prayerful practice. And I started, I think, to also notice it in the community. As you mentioned, Andrew, like a woman that I'd known for many years, she's like, yeah, I learned that she enrolled her children into a Christian school. That was very, I was like, what? Like, what is that about? And then she's like, yeah, and shared her journey. And then she's like, why don't you come to church with us? And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do it. And then one Sunday I decided to go with her, and I lost myself. I mean, like, I just started bawling. I was like crying in this church service. And to be very honest and kind of mean, and then this is where I'm like, I just thought I was being a really loving person. I'm in this church with a lot of people that I never would have associated as, my friends, or people that I would have thought were good people. It was like a quite stereotypical, like Christian white church, and people that I kind of thought were like this, but they were so kind. There was just this kindness. And I could tell it was genuine, because I was crying. I was like pouring out my heart, and it was so genuine. And it was a feeling of connection and love that I had not experienced in years of my adult life. Through all of the communities, all of the women's groups, all of the song circles, there was some level of love and genuine, like, care, devotion to me that wasn't there before. And I found it at this church. It was like, this is really odd and confusing. And then continued to share it with him, and started to go to church a little bit more. Still felt kind of like I shared a bit ago, we don't really have like a church that we go to. Trying to sort through that, and also feeling like we didn't really belong still to many of these places, like we didn't really fit. But yeah, then through the hurricane and the melanoma diagnosis, I found this place of surrender. And it was like every alternative clinic or healthcare provider that I ended up being at, they all had an element of Christianity inherent in what it was. And I didn't know that. It was like, I didn't know that this clinic was Christian until I walked in the door and then saw like this beautiful painting on the wall. Right. And I'm like, okay, and then it was just like, and then we were in like an Uber, and the Uber driver starts like talking to us about God and who, like, these podcasts we should listen to. We're like, how did we end up in this Uber with this lady telling us about a Christian podcast as I'm on my way to like another doctor's appointment? And it just continued to come in more and more and more, and everywhere we found ourselves, until I was at one center in California, and I didn't again have any idea it was really related to Christianity. And then I mentioned something, and it was like it all opened up, and I was in a prayer circle, and I saw Jesus, like, like, yep, that's what happened. And still really trying to make sense of it, honestly, like with my background and with Jay and our differences around like this aspect of surrender and what that means, and what we do teach our children, or what we believe, what we read, what we allow in our home now or don't allow in our home. There aren't a lot of like clear answers for us.
Well, I think,
or there are.
What I would like to just add one observation to some of the things that you shared, and that I feel like this Christmas piece has always kind of been there, where it's like, from my perspective, it's like the beginning and the end of Christmas, and not just like music, but like all of the things associated with it. It was like, I noticed you had a larger longing for stretching that time frame out each year. And it was like, okay, so, but it speaks to now hearing you say this, like this was connecting to something in you that was feeding something, some sort of heart connection and opening. And the other thing that upon listening to you share all of that, it seems like there was some shift within all of this that signaled to you that there was a force that was greater than yourself and outside of yourself, that was ultimately something that you could like surrender into and trust, and you didn't have to figure all of it out on your own. Yeah. And that seems like a pretty significant like thing that I've heard you share, maybe not in so many words, but like that type of idea. And so I don't know if you want to share any more about that.
Well, I'll pause for a moment and see if there's.
The question I have is, this is happening all around us right now. This thing you're describing, JD, is not just you. It's in my family. I feel like it's happening elsewhere. Do you have some thoughts, you or Jay? It's happening, so how do you explain it? Like, what explanations do you make for this moment?
I mean,
I have all kinds of ideas.
Yeah, you should. I'm talking a lot, but
I mean, for me, I'm JD's husband and partner, and we parent our children together. And so for her, this experience has been coming from a different place within her. And so I've been accepting and trusting and supportive of the process, but have been going through my own journey. And for me, it's really about diving into the kind of like the inner process. So, you talked earlier about the sun You talked about quantum biology and quantum physics and all of these ideas. And so, I hearken back to this idea of like astrotheology. And I don't know if you guys were aware of, what was it, Zeitgeist, when that came out?
Yeah.
So there is a lot where there are these different levels of perceptions of reality, these different denser and more subtle versions of these things. And so like, I feel like that's all encoded into us in this way. And so, Andy, when you shared the story about your mom and prayer, it's like, to me, that speaks to a integration of these aspects of ourself. Like, we are a collection of subtle frequencies and vibrations, whether you want to call that spirit or astral or etheric or some sort of like electromagnetic impulse that has consciousness, whatever you want to call it. There is a way to interface with that from the density of our physical beings through intention, breath, and vibration that is some sort of a spiritual technology that we have access to. And so, I'm interested in understanding like what makes those things tick, So I've been exploring the breath and the prayer within this context of Christianity and its origins. And so for me, that really lights me up. And it's like, I don't know, I look at it as like this convergence or confluence of all of the things that are the head and the heart. And so it's like, we as a race are kind of like forced to come to terms with this in a new level. And it's, AI is a piece of what's pushing us to do that. A lot of these global heightened incidences that are happening are forcing us to reckon with, like, personally, we have had a number of things that have forced us to reckon with things at a deeper level. And so, yeah, I mean, I look at it as like another expression of that. So that's what I got right now.
Yeah. And like, there's people, right, who are realizing this and seeing that there's a surge, quote unquote, of Christianity. And of course, people are saying that's because the second coming is on the horizon, and that's part of it. And I clearly have no idea if that's the reality of what's coming or not. And there's a part of it that through it doesn't really matter to me. Like, I have found such a deep and profound sense of love and purpose and meaning, but still like outside of a way that I can clearly describe, that it's just settling. And I don't need to have all of the answers in the way that I used to try to make sense of something, even though I'm interested and want to, and some days are way more intellectual than others. But I was recently listening to something, a book, an audiobook, and it was about this concept of we're currently disciples of the internet and disciples of technology. And that the way we are now like moving through reality, the way our brains are like programmed to think is like this quickness and this practicality. And of course, that's like a sequela of the industrial age. And it's just faster and faster and quicker and quicker. And it's like, well, if you want to believe in God, well, prove it to me. It's like, well, do you want me to get you where I am? Well, then tell me all the practical steps that you got there. And of course, that's how we're designed now to kind of look for the way we make sense of what's going on around us, is this quick answer, and to have it be in practical tools and steps and explain it in all the ways. And it's like, that's coming, I think, to a crescendo, right? Like with AI and everything, it's like, it's building and building so much that it's like the opposite's going to happen, like the swing of the pendulum. And is that the point? Is that like, it's bringing us back to, well, we have to be mystical still, because it's not going to take us there. AI is not going to take us to a feeling of being fulfilled. It's not going to get our children to it's actually, now we see it's like doing the opposite, like
It's the opposite
with all the mental health, with the physical health, all the things. And it's
the opposite.
It's like returning us to this ground zero of mystery. And through that, somehow it's like channeling in this element of what we've termed as Christianity, is like how I'm seeing it. And maybe we don't really know why yet. I don't know.
can I here? I asked the question because I haven't had an answer myself. Um, when I listen to the two of you, I think that this is how I think about it right now. There's a unit I teach about magnetism that talks about magnetoreception, which is animals being able to find home by tracing, like they get far away from some location, but they can experience what the magnetic field was from their home, and they can sense the gradient that gets them back there, and that's how cats and turtles and animals find that. And I was like, well, do humans have magnetoreception? And I don't know if we do or not, but I know if it does exist, we're wiping it out in electromagnetic fields that we're immersing ourselves in. Um, and so that's how I feel like what's happened in society. We've immersed ourselves in so many levels of lies, and we've been immersed in, like, soaked in levels of lies and untruth. And to be honest, I don't know where the bottom is about how deep these lies I've been told about how things are and how they should be, how they can be, how they must be. And so what I hear you, Jay, talking about is like people are trying to develop their own internal, because if everything you know is a lie, then what's true? You can't use anything they've given you to figure that out, because you don't know which one of these things is just another fabrication. Like, just
And it's all going to change tomorrow anyways.
right.
You know,
So it's like people trying to get their own centering and own technology of discernment for what is actually real. And we're being forced as the lies get deeper and more exposed, and they just come up in our face. And for me, AI is like the symbol of lie, the symbol of division, of internal division, and just a lie. And I think we are, in a sense, being thrust and forced, if we listen to that, to find out how am I going to decide what's true? How am I going to decide what's real? And I think that's the journey my brother's on. I do think that's my journey, but it hasn't taken me into his same place per se. But I think it's why it's brought us closer as opposed to farther, even if, and that's what I hear and what you both are describing is we're all being forced to find that technology of truth for ourselves, or of discernment, when we didn't think we had to before. And it's very similar to like what you describe in Hurricane Helene. Things get wiped out, and now we've got to, okay, what's real now? And what's real about what I know? What's real about what the community has to offer around me, and what's my place within it? That's all now going to be reassessed and rebuilt. Um, and and I think even the thing that you said about how when you went to that church and you went from being so separated to being so together, those are what's possible for people. I think so we often wonder how people are so divided, so separate. How can we ever come together? And I think stories like that speak to the possibility of it changing like that.
Mm-hmm.
If we're open to it, and if we create the possibilities of it.
Thank you for that reflection. Yeah.
I guess we had you on JT in the past to discuss midwifery and home birth and the importance of skin to skin contact, and also just um, how we nurture our children, and the importance of at that time when we connected the separation of tech from our kids and having them experience real uh, natural experiences. I wonder how this fits in with your background, and if you still incorporate those elements on your journey.
And I haven't honestly been doing much with birth for since the school. But I feel like it's only adding to that. Like when I look back at my experience in midwifery, or in particular, what I've felt kind of drawn to contemplate on more is the idea of healing, like from the standpoint of mental health and trauma, and how we improve our lives. And from like the place that I'd been operating at for so long, it was like, that's up to me. And of course it's still up to me. Like I understand that. I think I do. Like I understand as best I can the idea of free will, and it still is up to me. But there's this level of like perpetual, what I feel is like a guilt and shame. Like it's up to you, and you didn't do it well enough yet. You didn't get to the bottom of your trauma from when you were 3, so your birth didn't go the way you wanted. You just need to meditate a little bit more. You need to write in your journal, but there was some level of like me as a human, or this whoever I would have been working with, they didn't quite do it well, or they didn't do it, and it's still on them to figure that out. And there was some like release of that where I was just like, oh, well, that's I can't, it's not just up to me. It really isn't in this way. And I am good. Like it was like, I am a good person. It's not just like me failing at not doing enough of my internal work yet. And that's why my life doesn't look like I want it to, or my birth didn't, or my child doesn't. That there is something beyond me that is working with me. And I might not be able to make sense of it in this moment, but there is a level of goodness that's like carrying me on that current. And it's not always going to feel good. There's death in that, there's illness, there's pain, and trying to make sense of that being a part of this reality. And that's, a defining aspect to being human are those like dichotomous experiences that show us pain or show us death or show us like this element of being on earth. But I guess in looking back, I feel as if I could have offered so much more had I been able to bring an element of what I'm learning now to these experiences, a greater depth of peace, around and inside of like some disastrous moment, or a greater sense of triumph in like a beautiful birth. Like it would have just enhanced these experiences that I went through when I didn't have this. And I see that now, like with our child that we're raising, like, so I can apply it to that concept where it's bringing more to his life, because we have an element of what we define as Christianity. It's offering him something, whether it's more joy or more comfort in a hard moment, or a path out of a hard moment. Like he's praying, and it's not like we're telling him he has to. We're offering maybe like, try this, but then he's doing it on his own, and I'm watching him like come out of something. And I don't need to attach that necessarily to Christianity, but I'm seeing that it's helping him. I'm seeing that it's helped me. And so from that, I'm allowing this thing to have like a hold in our lives, because I feel like it's offering us something we didn't have without it. I don't know if that answers the question, but
I mean, you
doesn't answer the question, Eduardo.
The one other thing, I don't know if it's a question I'm trying to figure out as I was listening this all since we've started the very start of this episode. I don't know how to answer this question. I asked this question, excuse me. I sometimes have to take trips up to other states of Mexico, and so I take I hitch a carpool ride over instead of driving, and sometimes I'm in this car for 3 hours or 4 hours, and I don't know who I'm going to expect. So I've had psychologists driving, I've had very religious people driving, and passengers, and when suddenly there's a discussion and you just try to make conversation, and most of the time it goes all right. There were a few times that I've been around very evangelical Christians, and I stay away from saying atheist. I try not to even label myself, because I think it brings up like a barrier or some sort of, they think there's something around that, and there's already a preconceived notion about what that is. And in these car rides, sometimes I'm being pushed and pushed and pushed for what my beliefs are and what is my connection to God. And I don't want to discuss and argue. And in that, I find a way to connect. And in that connection, we discuss the greater challenges of life, such as death, such as life and conflict in relationships, So I see, as I'm struggling here to find the question. I see how when you're connected by faith, I see all that, and I have a deep appreciation for that. I don't have any criticism around that, and I actually do love it. And in my yoga classes, I see a yearning for people. I said this in the last episode that people want me to include more spiritual, uh, integrate more spirituality in the yoga classes apart from just uh, doing poses. They want me to talk about what is this connected to the larger picture. And I think there's maybe a global crisis of not knowing where we're heading and leaning onto these uh, rituals, rites, or a spiritual background. So I guess that's where I'm trying to figure this out. And I don't know if any of this makes sense. I'm rambling here. So if you can help me out here. So does that make sense where like people are yearning for growth and also pushing, not pushing,
Mhm.
does that make any sense? That's why I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to bring this up because I'm like, how do I find the question in this? Help me out here.
Can I try, Eduardo, to see if here's how I heard the question, but I'll put it in a fewer words, and then Jay and JD just respond to whatever. What I heard the question was, what is your relation, given your experience of this, what's your relationship to evangelizing? That's what I heard. But is that not the question, or?
Mhm.
But that's a piece of what I heard in that question.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really know yet. I think for me, it's so new. It's really just, here I am. This is what's happened to me. Maybe it'll be interesting to you or helpful to you or not. Like, I don't feel more inclined to do anything beyond that at this point. Yet we're starting a podcast, and so there's an element of sharing this because that feels important, but I don't have a sense of like, I've got it figured out and you have to do it X, Y, and Z, or else it's not. Like, that's not how it happened for me. That didn't work for me. I mean, I think everybody's probably had an experience where somebody tried to get them to do something within the context of probably Christianity or some other religion, and you were like, hell no. I'm like, no. And you're not going to make me do that kind of thing. So it feels very important to me to just be sharing at this point in time what's happened with us, and hearing that it's happening to other people around me or in communities that feels like new and interesting, like you shared, Andy, and like be talking about it and trying to sort through it and figure out what, I mean, I feel so new to all of this. For example, like even having a Bible I've never had a Bible before the last year in my life. Like, that's only been a thing in a hotel room drawer, right? And so I'm trying to understand the journey of the Bible and all the different perspectives of the different religious, ways of looking at it. And, for me, I think there is some sense of, well, there's an Old Testament and a New Testament, right? So there's like an evolution to the Bible. I don't know, right? Maybe like there's a process of how the influence of Jesus on the planet made something different before and after he was here. So to me, that's like an evolution, like something's growing and changing, and it still is now. And do we know exactly what that is or what it's going to look like and what it should be or shouldn't be? I can't say I do, but something feels like it's happening. And I'm trying to suss that out through my own experience and through those around me, through conversation and relationship. So I don't really see myself, I guess, defined as an evangelist. I don't exactly even know what that means. I have ideas, but yeah. You want to add to that?
I mean, so we've been to a lot of different churches, different contexts. Some Catholic, a lot of Christian, non-Catholic Christian churches, and I mean, I would say that for me, I have a lot of skepticism or critique around the way that things are being held and delivered. I think that there's a lot of, in my opinion, there's a lot of this urgency and marketing piece that come into it, whether it's like strictly monetary, like we need you to up your level of commitment and give us money, or like this sort of like spiritual marketing, like you have to do this now, like now's the time, this offer is going to expire kind of vibe. And so to me, those things don't really, I kind of get turned off and shut off by that type of thing. And so for me, it's become really like about finding the inner process of, like I said before, it's like this intersection of breath, vibration, spirit, and matter. And like a friend of ours that we actually did an interview with named Josh McLaughlin, that would be an interesting thing for you guys to just check out and hear his perspective, because bless you, for me, it's really comforting to hear somebody that is really well versed in all things Christianity and spirituality. However, he is able to come out and very clearly say, like, Christianity is not the church.
Mm.
It is something that happens at the intersection between God and our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something really reassuring and comforting in hearing how he's able to frame some of these things. And so,
for example, I was speaking with a person who's a Methodist reverend of the Methodist Church yesterday, and they were saying, every church you go to is going to have something that you can't like get align with. Every church you go to is going to have something that you can't align with, or that you're going to question, or that doesn't quite feel right. And at this point in time, they were now exploring some things within Catholicism and saying, like, the Methodist people don't want me anymore, because now I'm thinking, and it's like, that's all what humans have done to make sense of something bigger than us within this fabric of reality. And that's probably always going to be there, because we have minds that want practical answers, and we think about things, and that's an aspect of survival. So I think that there has to be this continual, like you're sharing, bringing something into your own heart, figuring out how it makes sense to you, and then authentically offering that to someone else without any attachment to what they may or may not do with it.
I guess the thing that comes to mind for me, like we started a podcast called What's Left 2018, and we were thinking about that only in political terms. And it was out of an experience of a kind of Hurricane Helene that came through and disappointed us about the world, the left world, the revolutionary world, the socialist world, for me, that I thought I was living in, and it just got swept away by a hurricane. And the hurricane really hit hard the second round when COVID hit, and to see the response of my comrades essentially to that. But as I think of it, it's not just a question of what's left politically. It's like what's even left that's real. And I do think that is, like, I never anticipated when we did What's Left having this kind of conversation, not about Christianity, but about even a spiritual world or other things that don't involve Ukraine or Russia or United States or something. I thought that was the domain of it. And if it had stayed only in that domain, I don't think we would have ever found really what's left or what's true. And so I'm very glad, I'm very comfortable that I want to have more conversations. And I told this to John Kleisik, who, he is the last person to be trying to convert somebody to Christianity. But our last conversation was, he put a few questions to me that are still rolling around in my head. And that was not by accident, but I do think it comes out that evangelizing is not just something Christians do. Like, the message that's starting to emerge from this podcast that came up last week, which is, if you don't like the world you're living in, then find the center of yourself and the community you're going to work with to do something about it. Because you're not going to find the truth by just finding out by just revealing the lie. You do have to find out what's true for yourself. And that message over and over again is really what resonated with Jay said. And as I think about a friend who has, he's a socialist comrade of mine who's come back and said, Andy, what's going on with you guys? Like, I want to talk. And AI is driving him crazy. He's like, what the hell's happening? Like, he's a musician. He's like, what are they doing? And I understand. He wants to find out what they're doing. And I'm like, we'll do that, but we're going to really have to find out what we're doing, and like, I'm starting to evangelize that message. Like, that is a message I am starting to be like, no, I'm not going to, like, you can figure it out, but it's all going to be fraud anyway. We're going to have to figure out what we're about. And so I may be saying it one way, this way, in 6 months to a year, I may be becoming a Jehovah's Witness of telling people that message, but I don't know. I'm not going to restrict myself to anything other than to say that it's not a bad thing to share your truth. It's a good thing, and it can be done in so many different ways. So that's what I think about, because I do think we are often fearful of people who are trying to affect us. And when I went to this new middle school that wasn't about the shots and things like that, it turned out it was attached to a church, and it turned out one of the head teachers is the son of a pastor and himself is a pastor. And 6 months into being there, he was like, God brought you to us. And I was like, I didn't know how to take that in the first, but about a year later, I was like, I'm not arguing with him. I know what he's saying is, there is something mysterious in the world that made us intersect, so that somebody we needed to have in this school was here. And he knew I was an atheist. And I would, it was just like, I don't know, man, this stuff trips me out.
Well said. Truly, though. Yeah. It's in sharing our story is our truth, right? Like that's what that is. And however that can be inspirational for someone to follow what you're following, or inspirational to do something different, there's a level of being detached to that. And I think that's part of how Christianity has its can be corrupted or hooked, but just like anything, it's you start to see that, well, that's what was happening within the medical system. That's what's happening within the political system. It's a system that's, being presented as one thing, but actually something else is going on. Then you realize it through personal experience. And then you're like, oh my God, what's happening? And you're trying to find your truth within that, and then the people that you can connect to that have similar experiences or are needing to hear your experience to find empowerment for themselves.
So obviously we've spent a lot of time on not just, I shouldn't say, on the spiritual, on the stuff that came up around the baptism. I don't know what to think if I want to go up more with this episode, but before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd want to share? And frankly, I feel like there's more to get into. I feel like there's a whole area of just quantum that I'd like to talk about at some point, because I have associations with it that come from my science background that I would like to share with you to then see how that resonated with it or didn't, with how you guys talk about quantum biology and its intersection with God or Christianity even. But I don't think I want to add that to this episode, because I feel like this is complete as it is. But is there anything else you'd like to share about your current journey that's related to anywhere, I guess?
Do you have anything else? Or why do you?
I mean, I think if we just spend a little bit of time talking about Rising Sovereign and what.
Sure. I feel like I'm at a loss for that in the moment.
For what to say about that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But do you have?
Well, I think to kind of tie back into what we said before as Rising Sovereign being a continuation from Ada, it's a way to continue to share, and for us to in real time work out some of the nuance of where these different things intersect and how we're living our lives, how the decisions that we're faced with on a day-to-day basis are informed by the multi-dimensional layers of all of these different things. So whether that's spirituality or being sovereign-minded or navigating health and wellness, parenting, all of these things, looking at the education system and what we can do about that, what we should do, what our expectations should be around any of these external systems or institutions. And so really, continuing to create a forum for not only ourselves, but for other people to connect in and share some successes, some, mainly focus on how we can build a greater amount of resources to navigate these things, not necessarily the horror stories, although, some of those harrowing stories of what happened and the results and the lessons learned can be really, entertaining. That won't be devoid of any of that, but it's setting up a template for further exploration around these things. So that's what I would say about Rising Sovereign.
Yeah, and we didn't even mention homeschooling and essentially freedom education, which is like literally the way I got to know about you both. So it's funny that these even the starting place. I mean, that's connected to this stuff, but it's just funny how I'd forgotten that's a whole area.
Yeah. And we're coming kind of to the end of summer, and so people are starting to think more about, well, my kid's going to be going back to school or not going to school, and why would I not want to send them there? I feel like there's just this percolating of people asking more questions and having a sense that there's more to the story. If COVID brought anything to the surface, even for the least conspiratorial minded person, there's like a questioning of, is that really what happened or not? And where do I really want my children to be going, and what environment do I want them to be raised in? Yep. And there is, I hope, with that, a return to understanding our own strength, our own choice points within all of these things that we're faced with around raising children, whether it's their education or their health or their spirituality or the morals and values that they're going to be entering into the world with, and how is that going to help us on a big and small scale or hurt us. And it goes back so much to Andy, you just saying what is true now. And I think most people have a sense, especially with the infiltration of AI and technology to the place that it is, that there's like a question of what really is true. And for us, the podcast will be a platform to be able to explore that.
Mm-hmm. That's exciting.
Thanks. Thanks for all of your support.
I appreciate you both being here again. I'm really looking forward to having another conversation about any of these topics we talked about. And honestly, I think there's a whole conversation to be had about partnership, love, and where one person is more conscious of managing a health issue, which is something that Brandy and I are navigating. I think there's a whole area like that. Just that part in your freedom, in your sovereign rising, really, there was a lot of things in there that resonated with me that I thought I'd like to talk with you about and share, and that have caused me to think. So there's so much. So I just appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thank you guys both.
Yeah. It's really good to talk with you and to have a place to feel like we have some support to talk through these things too. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I guess that does it for this week's episode. Yeah. Well, that does it for this week's episode. Jay and JD, the founder of ATA, Appalachian Academy for Therapeutic Arts, and Rising Sovereign Podcast, a podcast for spiritually grounded and sovereign-minded. Discussions on ancestral nutrition, reshaping education, radical parenting, navigating health, circadian rhythms, and quantum biology. And we'll link episodes to anything that you have shared here with us. What's Left is a weekly political podcast / challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes where we found this episode, or on our blog on what'sthatpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you like anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on the Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog, again, any of those links in the episode notes, wherever you found this episode. If you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog and Andy will answer you. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-host Andy Lipson, and thank you both for joining us, Jay and JD. We look forward to having another discussion with you sometime in the future. All right. Thank you for listening. Ciao.